I want to talk now about Roman law, because it strikes me that although there's a slot for it later down on the list of topics week by week, which amazingly we're still more or less following, it strikes me that it links in quite nicely to the Renaissance and that it wouldn't be unreasonable to move it forward. But before I want to discuss Roman law, I want to make a few comments about what it replaces. And I'm going to have to make some distinctions, but first of all, you're going to have to get out of your mind all that you know about courts in Britain and imagine something completely different. Most courts, when we see courtroom dramas are on all the time, normally American ones, where the lawyers walk around and can't sit still. They're much more confined in Britain, but essentially you see American drama, or you see a British courtroom drama, they're showing the same thing. They're showing what's called a common law system. And everywhere else most other places are completely different. Most places do not have juries. Most places do not have a concentrated session in which the case is tried. It will be over periods. And in most cases as well, they don't decide what the crime is until the end of the trial, because they don't know what the circumstances are. You can't try somebody for manslaughter or murder unless you know what the actual circumstances were. And that's the normal system that they have. And to hear BBC reporting is hilarious, because somewhere like Italy they have about half a dozen judges who are assessors who help the main judge. And the BBC always refer to them as the jury. They're not the jury at all, they're assessors. They actually are involved in discussion of the legal processes. Likewise, when somebody's arrested in Saudi Arabia, they don't even know what charge they face. No, because the court hasn't worked out yet what's happened. And you're going to have to imagine you're dealing with a court in somewhere like Saudi Arabia, not in Africa, because large numbers of them actually follow the English common law. And I was in a courtroom in Gambia speaking to the barristers, and they were beautifully equipped with wigs and full robes, and they had before them the standard English textbooks, and those are the ones that they referred to. I asked about Gambian case law, and they produced a couple of Xerox sheets and said this is all it amounts to. Otherwise, they're using English case law. But the point is, get out of your mind any ideas or thoughts that you might have about the present day legal system. It does not, completely different. Up till 1500 and beyond that, in a lot of places, not so much in the higher courts, but certainly in the lower courts, they're very hot on procedure. The procedure that they follow is fixed and rooted, and it goes through a dozen or 15 separate stages, and each stage has to be done properly. The summons of the accused, the laying of the charge, and these have to be done absolutely properly. The procedural law is absolutely clear, and the idea is that the procedures will yield an outcome, and it will be possible then to determine what has actually been done, what the circumstances are, and what the penalty is that can be imposed. And there will be an investigation. What will happen will be that somebody will go to the court, or they'll get a lawyer to write a letter to the court, which will open up proceedings. The court will look at it, and it will meet amongst itself and say, we better find out what's happened. And there are a few procedures that they use. One is called an inquisitional inquest. Both of them are misleading terms. It is an investigation, and they will send out a court official who will ask people what they know has happened, what they think has happened, and will take a deposition. And the deposition will come back, often a great book of testimony. It'll go back to the court, and the court will say, well, it's all looking a bit in favour of the man who claims that local brigands stole his sheep. So let's get them all round to swear an oath, and not even get them round to swear an oath, get them to swear an oath where they live. And when the evidence is stacked up in favour of one person, then he makes what's called a decisory oath, and he swears. And very often, somebody who's guilty won't swear the oath, they'll be too frightened. And the other method that's used is oath helpers. You get people to come along and also swear that you're not the type of person that would do that you wouldn't be the sort of person who would steal goats. And normally you'd have to get a dozen, 40. I've seen some with several hundred people have to come along and swear an oath that you're not the sort of person that will do that. And then all the evidence goes back to the court, and they arrive at a decision that the goats have been stolen and that the person is owed 50 florins for the goats. And then you'll go to the process of execution to execute the judgment, not execute the person, execute the judgment. So this procedure is followed and it yields an outcome. The procedure is fixed. And quite what penalties are and what crimes are is all very vague. It's just simply presumed that certain things are right and certain things are wrong. Stealing is obviously not on. But of course there are all sorts of problems. He stole the goats first from me. Most of the disputes are over land and ploughing up other people's lands, going off with bits of their woods. Huge problems when rivers change course and when people divert rivers, and this river's always been the boundary, and now he's built a mill further up and the rivers change course. So it's very lengthy disputes all about this. Now, how's it settled? In reality, it's settled by people sitting around a table. And this is a nice picture of a medieval court in action, if you can see it. Get it nicely. Can you see it? That's not better. You can see they're showing off their legs. There. And people say, what have we done? What do we do when the rivers change course? Well, what have we done in the past? Oh, I think we did that. What evidence is there that that's his land that's been ploughed up? Well, all his neighbours say he's had it for generations in the family. Oh. It's all very rudimentary. And they said, well, he must have done something. He must have done something wrong. He's been bad. It's actually a crime to be bad. And a penalty will often be imposed for being bad. And it's normally a ludicrous penalty, which requires the person then to go to the court and make a financial settlement. You don't really want to execute people, because if you execute people, you jail them, you've got to look after their widows and orphans and things like that. It gets very messy. So normally you will seek to impose a financial penalty. They have a thing in Hungary called the fine of the head. That means that you're sentenced to be decapitated, but you produce 200 florins and you redeem your head. That's the normal way procedures go. It's very rudimentary. It's people sitting around a table trying to remember what they've done in the past, inventing what they've done in the past if they can't remember, not knowing how to deal with complicated problems that arise. A lot of the time they just say, oh, come on, make an agreement amongst yourselves. And then we'll back it. We'll give him half the goats. And then we'll call it a day. There's the danger of when people aren't satisfied, they relitigate. So it's much better to try and get a solution that everybody can agree with and everybody's going to be moderately happy with. And these methods carry right through in lower courts until the 19th century, and they're all pretty rough and ready. And the people round the court are not learned people. They're ordinary peasants. They're assessors that are dragged in. The lawyers will be often trained. Either they've gone to university or they've learnt the job on the hoof, as it were. There are the only learned people there. I mean, we have illiterate judges, even in royal courts, of illiterate judges. It's not learned. It's not learned law. It's very unlearned. It's very rough and ready. The procedures are firm and fixed. Everything else is very fluid. Roman law is the Roman law of the late Roman Empire, and it's actually early Byzantine, because it's 6th century and put together by the Emperor Justinian. It's one of the last documents written in Latin are Roman law. After that they start using Greek. As you can imagine, there's quite a lot in it that is about the power of rulers. This is, late Roman Byzantine despotism, and that famous line, "What pleases the prince has the force of the law," comes from Roman law. And people, the churches know the procedures of Roman law. They're following Roman law procedures, and it's those Roman law procedures that have been followed by the courts, but they don't know about the substantive content. They don't know that there are great catalogues of crimes, that being bad can be divided up into theft, murder, threatening behaviour, drunken disorderly, masturbation. Very keen on identifying that as a crime, but they never prosecute it. They're just always included in manuals right up to the 19th century. Different types of masturbation as well, interestingly enough. The Roman law establishes categories of crime, categories of property ownership. It allows varieties of, so it creates the distinction classically between something you own and something you have, i.e., until recently, I had the house in which I was living, but it was the ownership belonged partly to the bank. And that type of arrangement is only possible when you've got a sophisticated legal system which can deal with categories, and Roman law can deal with categories. Roman law is classified law, and it has a very wide vocabulary that allows a very wide variety of crimes to be included, and more particularly a very wide number of different types of property ownership. The one I like is the Rhodian law of the sea, which makes the distinction goods that are lost at sea, between flotsam and jetsam. And we have that distinction, it's come into English law. If you throw items off your ship in order to lighten it, that's jetsam. And anybody who finds it can keep it. If it's cargo that is released when a ship goes down and floats onto the beach, then that's flotsam, and it belongs to the crown. And that is the sort of distinction that Roman law is making. The distinctions that haven't existed. It deals at length as well with the movement of rivers. What happens to bridges when they get knocked down? Whose responsibility is it? Can I move onto, can I walk onto my neighbour's property to fix his dike if it's broken and is flooding my property? All of these type of complicated issues, they're all addressed by Roman law, and they create a huge versatility when it comes to legal systems. It provides the solutions in a written form, and this is the critical point. It stresses writing, that you don't go and say, I've farmed this piece of land for generation after generation, as my neighbours will show. In Roman law courts, they will be able to say, yes, and do you have a charter affirming this? It wants written proof. This makes it very unpopular with peasants who normally don't have written proof of the properties that they're farming, largely because they've been given the property of the Lord. The Lord will affirm that they've been given this plot of land, but they've always gone off with other things. They've always dug into woodland. If property's owned by the king, they reckon they can get away with it because he won't turn up that often. So there are going to be huge problems with peasantry, and when the peasants confront the need to have written proof of ownership. And it encourages codification, and if one looks across Europe in the 16th century, there is codification. There's codification in Poland, there's codification in Hungary. They have started codification in the 15th century in Bohemia, as I recall. They start in Upper Austria in the 16th century, don't finish until the 19th century. But even codes that they've sort of half begun enter into court practice, and the courts start using them. So in other words, the law becomes stabilised, and we have categories of the law which we've never had before, giving the law the ability to deal with complex situations. We have a stress on writing, and we have a stress on comprehensive legal systems, and that's the importance of Roman law. And what I probably didn't mention is that they start getting hold of these Roman law texts in the 12th century. Then they stay within the universities. It's really the end of the 15th century that Roman law starts to come through and starts to affect judicial organisation and judicial practice across Central Europe. I think I've got everything in now. Thank you.